What's everybody? What's up, everybody? How's it going? Thank you. Gosh, I should mess up my words more often. That was the nicest reception I've had in the history of this ministry. So that was really good. Hey, we're so glad you guys are here. We're continuing in a series on the parables of Jesus, and so glad you're here. We've been diving into just different things, and we have a couple more parables that we're going to be talking about over the course of the summer. But tonight I'm excited to talk about this specific parable. The parable that we're going to study tonight, Jesus actually brings up this topic that was, in ancient Israel, was very much an issue for them. And when we read about it today, it remains very much an issue for us. And this topic actually has two different competing worldviews. On one side, the world says one opinion about this topic, and God is over here on this other side having a very strong opinion about this topic. And these opinions are diametrically opposed. And God, he calls one of these worldviews foolish and one of these worldviews wise. And this is especially important topic for us locally here in Huntington Beach in Orange County, because the people of Orange County are uniquely afflicted with this issue. This is an issue that we all have to deal with at some point in our lives, and we honestly, if we're real with ourselves, especially in the place we live, we all kind of live with an acute sense of an awareness of this topic. And if you were to go God's way instead of the world's way in this topic, it would almost as if be like you did a 180 in a stream and you began to swim upstream. This is how different God wants you to live in this particular area. And this is how you want to live in this particular thing. In the words of Jesus, if you hear Jesus here, you hear his warnings on this. And if you actually hear Jesus' warnings on this topic, it will actually free you up in a way that I don't know if you would have thought possible. If you hear the words of Jesus, you would actually be able to remove some of the shackles that plague you with this thing, and you would be able to live free, to do what God would call you to do, to live for him even better. And if you do this, this is the crazy part, it will help you here on earth, but if you live the way God wants you to live, rather than the world wants you to live in this topic, you'll actually invest for your home in heaven forever. It's incredible. And so the context of this parable, much like the beginning of every other parable that we've studied so far, Jesus is talking to a big group of people. There's thousands of people talking in Luke chapter 12, verse 13. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Luke chapter 12, verse 13. And at the beginning of this parable, there's so many people there that it actually says earlier in this chapter that they were trampling over each other. There were so many thousands and thousands and thousands of people there that they were literally running over each other. There were so many people. It was so chaotic, so hectic. And Jesus, he sees this group of people and he begins to teach like he would do. And Jesus, being the amazing teacher that he is, he talked about a lot of different things. He begins with talking about the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. How the Pharisees were kind of this one way, and really they were hypocritical. Jesus then goes on to talk about how you really shouldn't fear men, you should fear God. This is what you need to fear if you're going to fear anything. And he goes on to say, listen, if you acknowledge me before people, I'm going to acknowledge you before angels. You acknowledge me here right now, and I will acknowledge you later. And then in the midst of all this teaching of Jesus, this guy, he interrupts everybody and he asks Jesus an inappropriate question, if I'm being honest with you. And this question, he interrupts his teaching and he asks Jesus this question, and we're going to read Luke chapter 12, verse 13, and it says this. It says, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who has made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" Look how weird this is. He's talking, he's teaching, and then all of a sudden this guy just pops up and he goes, "Hey, I have a dispute with my brother. Can you go ahead and rule on this?" And Jesus is like, "What? What are you doing?" And if you know anything about ancient Israel, you know that the firstborn son would get a double inheritance, double portion of the inheritance. And the rest of the siblings would just kind of get whatever was left. And so what we can probably assume from this guy was probably a second-born son or third-born son or something. And what he's wanting is he wants a bigger share of the pie. And so he's like, "Hey, Jesus, I have some injustice against me. Please, can you make it to where my brother shares everything with me? And Jesus, he looks at this guy, and he actually refuses to answer the question that he was posed with. And to tell him, he essentially said, listen, I'm like, what you're asking me to do, like you have arbitrators, you have judges that can like deal with this disputes. I'm not here for that particular thing. And Jesus was good at like not answering the question that people posed to him in the immediate time. Jesus, he saw through everything. I mean, he was God. The Pharisees would always try to trap Jesus with like, hey, you're either this or you're this. And Jesus would be like, I reject the question. Here's what you're really trying to get at. Jesus would be able to see through like the binary of the question. You are either A or B. And he'd be like, no. This is the thing that you're trying to get at. And this is what I'm talking to you about. And Jesus, he saw this guy who interrupted him. And he didn't answer the question that he wanted Jesus to answer, but Jesus looks at him and he sees like the root problem of this guy. And then Jesus begins to look to the crowd and he tells this parable. And it's amazing how Jesus does this, because Jesus, he's like Jesus loved this man so much that he could have just answered the question, he could have just figured it out, but what he wanted to do so badly was to get to the root of the issue. Jesus is like a physician. If you go in for some aches and pains, and he tells you, he's like, hey, I can fix the aches and pains, but really the problem is that you have an underlying disease. And this is the case with this guy, and this is the case with us even today. Jesus loves you so much that sometimes the question that you might pose to Jesus, he may not answer your question or play your game in order to fix the bigger problem within you. And he looks at this guy and he sees his real need, and he looks to the crowd and he teaches, and this is the parable that Jesus teaches. And this is what this man needed to hear, and this is what we need to hear, especially here in Orange County. In verse 15, it says, and he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Jesus, right here, this sentence, he sets up the whole parable and gives us the point of the parable before he's about to do it. So the point of tonight, if you just want to hear that early on, is to take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. For one's life, it doesn't consist of the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns, and I will build larger ones. And there I will store my grain and my goods. And then I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. You need to relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. And the thing that the world tells you always, and the thing that God tells you in opposition to that, is that this is the thing that the Orange County is shouting out. What the world will always tell you is to trust in your wealth. Trust in your wealth. The world will always shout at you saying things like, man, make as much money as you can. Money over everything. Like, get rich or die trying. I think I'm just naming 50 Cent songs at this point. But wealth, what the world says is like, if you get wealth, you get the status and power and security, the get out of jail free card, salvation for everything. Once you have enough wealth, you're going to be okay. Everything will be fine. Everything will be okay. Do whatever you need to do to get that money, and you'll be okay. Do whatever you need to be able to do to be able to buy that house in Orange County. Do whatever you need to be able to do to get that car, to get into that neighborhood, to be able to go on those vacations, to be able to go out to those restaurants. You need to relax. Once you get that, you can relax, you can eat, and you can drink, and you can be merry. And this is what the world says. Like, I didn't need to explain that to you because this, like, we get preached this in all the advertisements of the world. You get this and you will get the girl. Get this and you will be able to be happy. Get this when people will like you more. And this is what the world teaches to us. And the world says all of us have this internally, this desire to acquire. You, me, we all have it. We have this innate, like, ability to just want things, and we want good stuff, and we want the nice car. We want all this stuff, and it's this desire to acquire, and the world says, feed it. Feed it. Feed into it. Do whatever you can to figure out how to enable this desire to acquire. You can trust in wealth, and Jesus, he looks at the state of the world that had this desire to acquire, and he says there's another way. There's another way. You can either trust in your wealth, or you can trust in God. And these two things are diametrically opposed from each other. You can't, it says you can't serve God and money, and that's true. And you need to, even right now, as you think about where you are, like, do you trust in wealth, or do you trust in God? And Jesus begins the parable with the point up front. He says this, he says, take care, be on guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. To be on guard against covetousness. Do you know what that word means? Covetousness is simply this. It's an eager or an excessive desire, especially for wealth and possessions. And you may not think you are a covetous person, but maybe you just look a little bit deeper. We all have this ability. If we have to guard against that, means it's a natural thing that we all have. And Jesus, what he's saying is, like, you need to take care, be aware, be on guard against this, because this is not good. Where the world says trust in wealth, I'm asking you, please trust in me. Trust in God. And so today, as we walk through this parable, we just have 4 points that just come straight out of the text. And I think if we do these things, we might position ourselves as followers of Jesus who are trying to follow the Lord, as young adults who are trying to figure out how to do this. How am I going to set the course and trajectory of my life? And I promise you, if as a young adult, if you set the course and trajectory of your life guarding against covetousness, guarding against the desire to acquire, you are going to be freed from the shackles that enslave many people here in Orange County. But you got to be aware of it. You got to know that this is a problem for us all. Don't think that, I don't have very much money. No. We all have the level of wealth that you have does not disqualify you from having this. We all have it. So today, as we walk through it, let's be aware of what God is teaching us through this passage. So the first point that I have for you based on this passage is number one, being rich is not the problem. Being rich is not the problem. This man the rich fool that we read about here, it says that he had an exceptionally great harvest. And like he came about his wealth, honestly. There's no indication that he was a schemer or he got this wealth in a bad way. It was just kind of like he just did well. Like it's like someone who starts a business, who sells it, does really well. Like this is somebody who attained their wealth a good way. So what is Jesus saying? Being rich is not the problem. Jesus is not teaching against being wealthy or having a lot. No, that's not the issue. The issue that this guy had was that he looked at his wealth, and there were a couple things that he miscategorized about his wealth. There were a couple things that he missed the mark on. And the first thing that he missed the mark on was this guy, with the abundance that he had, with the wealth, the extra that he had, he decided that instead of like honoring the Lord with some of his wealth, blessing people with some of his wealth, he decided he was going to hoard his wealth. He hoarded his wealth. He says, I'm going to tear down my barns, I'm going to build larger ones, and then I will store my grain and my goods. in this parable, there's not a lot of information, but there is no consideration of returning back to the Lord a tenth of what he made, which is standard. There is no consideration of helping the poor in his area, the people who needed more food or anything like that. Like, this man was like, it's not bad to build bigger barns. It's not. It's not bad to save. It's not. But there's no consideration of acknowledging the Lord who gave him this thing. Like, he wasn't the one who made the crops happen. It was the Lord who made the crops grow. He just was the recipient of it. And he did not take this and honor the Lord with any sort of tithe or any sort of thing like that. He did not help anybody else who needed it. He built bigger and bigger barns to hoard it. And there was no indication he was generous to the people around him. It was simply all about him. And here's the problem that wealth is. Wealth is amoral. Wealth is not good or bad. Like, you're not a good person if you're rich. You're not a bad person if you're poor. Wealth is just a level of money that you have. The problem that wealth can have on you, though, is that wealth has the ability to move your eyes off of honoring the Lord and blessing people and back on to you and what you can get and how much you can add to your pot. This is the problem with wealth. This is the problem with the desire to acquire. There's always more. How much is enough? A little bit more. You're never going to reach this point where you're like, okay, I think I have enough. I can do all the things I wanted to do. No, if that's the case, if you never fix this, if you never figure this stuff out, if you never curb this desire to acquire, you will always, how much is enough? I just need a little bit more. I just need a little bit more. So being rich is not the problem. He hoarded his money. And then number two, the thing that made him a foolish person was that he trusted in his riches. It's not foolish to have riches. It's foolish to trust in your riches. In verse 19, it says, I will say to my soul, who talks to themselves like that, by the way? Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. So you just got to relax, you got to eat, you got to drink, you got to be merry. He tells his soul, like, he's a very introspective person, it sounds like. He's like, soul, you have everything that you could need. So relax, have a good time. And this man, what he doesn't realize is that he has wealth, but he does not have what his soul needs. Your soul needs so much more than that. Are you kidding me? The weight that of like the gap that weighs on your soul cannot be filled with money. It cannot be filled with excess. It cannot be filled with a relationship with people or a spouse or whatever status or achievement. Your soul needs so much more than wealth. Your soul was created by God. It was created for God. And when you give your life back to the Lord, that's when you can find fulfillment. That's when your soul can be whole. And this man, if you look at this man's life right before the end, before he dies, we would look at this guy and be like, this guy's doing awesome. Like, this would be like a guy who's, got the house, he's got the car, he's got the yacht, his house is amazing. We look at him and be like, must be nice being that guy. And on the outside, this guy looks like he is an abject success in life. But really, he's a failure. Why is he a failure? Because he trusted in riches. And riches can give you access and power sometimes here on earth, but riches, their access and power, is very limited. And it can't keep you from dying. It can't keep you from a lot of things. And he thought that his abundance created a storage problem in his life, when really his abundance created a heart problem in his life. And he thought, because of my wealth, I am safe and I am secure. But the problem with wealth is that it's so fleeting, Like, we're young enough to where, maybe we've seen some things, maybe we haven't. But, wealth is here one day, and it's gone tomorrow. Like industries that were once thought to be like, man, this is a money-making cash cow forever, could be gone the next day. We see so many shifting things in the economy and in business all the time. Do you know at one point in 1890, there were 13,800 companies in the United States in the business of building carriages pulled by horses? Do you know that? Do you know that by 1920, only 90 companies were left? A little thing called the Model T came out and revolutionized the industry. And the people who, like, there was like 13,800, that's like a lot of companies. That's like a lot of companies like, oh, we could make a good living doing this. They can't anymore. And listen, if you think that you're going to, like, I'm strong enough, my intellect is great enough that I'm going to be able to find the cash cow, whatever it is, and I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to be fine, and I'm going to be good with my money, I'm going to put it in the stocks. Listen, you may have good intellect. God may have gifted you with the ability to make money and stuff like that, and it's not a bad thing. Money is a good thing. Like, you can bless a lot of people. You know, it's better to be rich than poor and to live comfortably, right? Like, we know that. But listen, if you trust in money, it will fail you. But if you trust in the Lord, He will not. And the thing that you got to do is you have to unhitch yourself from the security and the trust of money. And you need to tie yourself to a God who is unchanging. The stock market is like this. Jesus and God is always good. He is always worth investing in. He is always somebody who we can come to. God is not fickle. Like, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if you go to God and you put your trust in the unchanging, immovable word of the Lord, you're going to be okay. Your money's probably going to go like this, but you're still going to be okay. Because you put your trust in the thing that is unchanging. Listen, money can be really good. You know, it's good to, like, I pray that everybody I know, that God would bless them, that they would be able to work hard and to experience the blessings of the fruit of their labor. I pray for that for all of you guys. Like, I hope that God blesses you. I hope that you do well. But what I want you to do is I don't want you to be tied down by the love of money. I don't want you to be tied down to this desire to acquire. And once you put everything in its proper category, you would actually be able to enjoy the money that God's blessed you with, because it's not something that you're serving all the time. And when you have everything in the proper category and you use money and you trust God, that's the way you need to do it, instead of using God and trusting money. You got to make sure it's in the right category. And when you do that, you're not going to be tied down the way other people are. When you have this attitude, money becomes a blessing in your life and not a curse. So you got to trust in the Lord and not in wealth. And number 3, the thing that we don't understand and we don't know is we don't know when, but we're all going to die. I don't love saying that to everybody. I'm not breaking any news with that. But you know, there's a new stat that came out this year that said 10 out of every 10 people will die at some point in their life. That's just a little joke for you guys. Here's the deal. We know that death is coming for us all. We don't know when, and we're really good at pushing it back and not thinking about it. And thinking, oh, I'll have more time later to think about bigger things in life. Or I'll have more time to figure out my relationship with God, or where I stand with God, or I have time to figure out this or that. The reality is, we don't know. We don't know if He will. I have no idea. People die every day. We literally do not know when our soul will be required of us. And if that's the case, and you live your entire life serving wealth and acquiring things, your ability to invest in something ends when you die. And the things that you invest in here, you'll be forgotten about. Like someone else who didn't work for your money will get your money. You guys know this? Like you probably have money that you didn't work for because someone else died. All of us are on a collision course for the end of our life. And the Bible and God, when what he says to this man who has made his entire life about acquiring things and getting more, Jesus is a very strong word for this guy. What does he call him? He says, "You fool." You fool, that's a strong word. A fool it's not something you want to be. And God calls this guy who is doing awesome, who is doing well. He would be killing it here in Orange County. He looks at this guy and he's like, you're missing it. You fool. Your soul is required of you tonight. And all the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? You know, you always assume you'll have more time. You'll always assume that you'll be able to sort things out with God, eventually get things right with other people, but you're not promised tomorrow. If you always have this attitude that I'll figure this thing out later, I'll do this later, you're being foolish. And when you pursue money the way the rich fool did, and you invest everything into the here and now, it will last just for a little bit. But nothing that you do will last forever. And if you do that, God's saying there's a different way to do it. And my fourth point, and the last point, is you got to be rich towards God. You got to be rich towards God. How do you like fight back from this desire to acquire? How do you get rid of all this stuff? Be rich towards God. Swim against the current. Go against the grain. Decide that you are going to be on guard. Decide that you're going to take care and be on watch, and I'm going to be generous towards God. And Jesus ends the parable saying, "So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." You know, the reality of life is that you actually don't own anything. You may think that you do, but you don't. Because as soon as your life is over, the things that you own will go to somebody else. And to be rich towards God is to invest in something that will outlast you. To being rich towards God is to invest in this eternal 401k. To be rich toward God is not simply adding a few religious activities to your wealth. No, to be truly rich towards God is not about what we have. True wealth is what we are to God. It's not about what we can get for us, but it's about what we can offer to the Lord. To be rich towards God is to have this idea to say, God, whatever I have, it belongs to you. I know I'm just managing everything at this point. I know that there's one day that I'm going to die and I'm not going to be able to have this stuff anymore. So God, whatever you choose to give me today in my lifetime, God, I just want to offer it up saying, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. God, I don't want to be somebody who's so tied down by this greed and covetousness. God, I want to be someone who is used by you to do whatever you want me to do. So Lord, would you help me? Would you give me gifts to give away? Would you let me honor you? Would you help me bless people? What is it you want me to do, God? Everything I have is on display for you to do whatever you want. So this is what I declare to you, Lord. You know, you can be poor and still be rich towards God. Later on in this book, Luke, Jesus and his disciples and everybody were at the temple, and they were, it was kind of a giving moment of the temple worship service, and you see all these Pharisees and other people writing big giant checks to the temple. And in the midst of this, there's a poor widow. The poor widow comes, and she doesn't have anything, and she doesn't really offer, what she's about to offer is like pales in comparison to what other people can offer. But this widow just drops in 2 little coins. 2 little pennies. And Jesus, he stops his disciples and he says, you see what the widow just did right there? The widow gave way more than any of these jokers did out here. He didn't say jokers. Because the widow gave out of her poverty, and these other people gave out of their wealth. So it's not about the amount of money that you have in your bank account to make you rich towards God. The issue is, what are you doing with what God has entrusted to you? So we know the world's take on this. And if you want to go God's way, you got to know what God says about it. And Jesus says, take care, be on guard. And to be on guard, we guard against many things in this life. We have a lot of passwords and extra passwords and variations of that password. We lock our doors, we lock our windows. We make sure that nothing else can get into a lot of different things. But some of us we're on guard in a greater capacity to protect our Instagram account more than we're on guard against covetousness in our life. And Jesus is using these words specifically. Like, if you want to fight against this, you have to actually be on guard. Like, you have to be like the bouncer of your heart. You know, you have to make sure that nothing gets in without you knowing about it. And you gotta make sure things don't get in if they don't belong there. But first, in order to do that, you have to like do some business with God and be like, God, what do I have? What have I allowed in my heart? Have I allowed this like covetousness to like seep into me? And I'm not rich, but am I obsessed with money? Do I think about it all the time? Do I think if only I could get this, then everything will be okay? Listen, Lord wants to free you. Every instruction that God has for you is for your benefit. It's for your flourishing. God is not trying to take money away from you. He's trying to bless you with his presence. So take care. Be on guard against covetousness. Life is not about the accumulation of wealth and getting things. So don't trust in it. Trust in God and watch him show up in your life in an incredible way.